When you're home alone, your house shouldn't talk back. Tonight, 5 first-person encounters that feel a little too real. Doors, lights, walls, all answering. First time posting, be gentle. I rent half of a really old duplex, and something's been moving in the shared walls at 2:13 a.m. every night. I rent half of a 1940s duplex with paper-thin walls and vents that carry every sneeze from next door. My neighbors moved out in May, but the landlord hadn't found a new tenant yet, so it's been quiet until the footsteps started. It's always at 2:13 a.m. I know because I started watching the time after night 3. The sound begins at the far end of my bedroom, soft, measured thumps traveling through the vent run above my ceiling, then stopping perfectly centered over my bed, like whoever's up there is deciding whether I'm asleep. I told myself it was thermal expansion or possums because the alternative was too weird. But on night 6, there was scratching. Not frantic animal scratching, slow, deliberate. It followed the path of the duct, whispering toward the wall where our living rooms mirror each other. I lay still and counted the breaths between sounds. When it stopped, I realized I was holding my phone like a talisman and hadn't hit record. The next morning I found something on the kitchen counter that I hadn't left. 3 tiny screws in a neat triangle. They were dusty, with a smear of black on the threads. The only thing in my place with screws like that was a cheap bookcase covering a weird painted-over square near the baseboard that I'd never questioned because renters don't question weird squares. I slid the shelves aside, and there it was, a service hatch. The paint line was obvious once I knew to look. Someone had sealed a small door flush with the wall. In an older place like this, it made sense. Maybe an access to the shared crawl space between units. I texted my landlord. He replied with a shrug emoji and old houses LOL. I'll swing by Friday. It was Tuesday. I pushed the bookcase back. At 2:13 a.m., the footsteps started again and halted above the bed. I sat up, heart pounding, and the scraping answered me, moving toward the living room. I stood there in the dark, one hand on the light switch, while something touched the baseboard behind the shelf. The wood shifted a millimeter. A draft slid out that smelled like insulation and damp earth. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I pulled the bookcase away. The painted seam around the hatch gaped in places, like someone had pried against it from the inside. 2 screws were missing from the right edge. I found them in my sink. I called my landlord again, then a handyman, then the non-emergency line, because I felt stupid calling 911 about a wall. By noon, I'd convinced myself a raccoon had somehow fallen into the shared crawl space and learned to walk like a person. That night, I stacked furniture in front of the bookcase. At 2:12, my phone alarm buzzed. I turned it off and sat waiting. 2:13, footsteps along the ductwork. They stopped over me. The drywall ticked like it was cooling. Then, one by one, the books on the lowest shelf pushed forward, as if a breeze moved through only that rectangle of air. I backed into the hall and grabbed the broom because weapon. A whisper came through the slats of the heat register. Hey. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It was like a mouth pressed to a vent. I couldn't make words. The broom trembled against the floor. The whisper again, hey, you're awake, good. Something slid behind the wall, a soft scrape, a fingernail testing paint. I realized the furniture I'd stacked was keeping me from pulling the shelf away. I realized how exactly I'd set this up to be trapped. The screws I hadn't found yet fell onto the tile, pinging and rolling. The hatch behind the shelf flexed, and a thin line of darker dark appeared around its edge. I put my shoulder into the bookcase, heaved, and it rocked an inch. The hatch flexed again, this time outward, bulging the paint like skin over a knuckle. The voice came one more time, so close it vibrated the register. I've been trying your door, it said, conversational, like a neighbor in the laundry room. But you keep locking it. The bookcase skidded. The hatch popped, paint cracking, a mouth-shaped gap opening at knee level. Through the split, I saw nothing for a second, then the curved white of an eye too, close, peering through the sliver, blinking sideways in the beam of my phone light. I screamed without sound and ran, taking the door chain in one hand and the knob in the other. I turned both and stood on my porch in bare feet, looking at the empty half of the duplex with its blinds closed and its for rent sign leaning in the grass. Behind me, wood creaked. I didn't go back in until the landlord arrived, Friday, 2 cops behind him. The hatch? It was there. It was old. It was sealed, he said, pointing at the broken paint line like I'd done this. He asked if I'd been drinking. I nodded because it was easier. The cops left after checking the vacant unit. Every door locked, every window dust-coated. Nobody had lived there for months. The handyman who re-screwed the hatch wouldn't meet my eyes. As he packed up, he set 3 tiny screws on my counter. Found those under the sink, he said, then hesitated. You might want to move. That night at 2:13, the footsteps didn't start. Instead, the vent in my bedroom exhaled a breath so cold it fogged my phone screen, and from somewhere between the walls came a sound like a tongue clicking against teeth, deciding. I don't know where else to post this, but my smart home created an admin, inside user, and started unlocking my door while I was in the shower. I bought the smart home stuff because I love having the high-tech convenience and safety gadgets, cameras, motion sensors, locks that send chirpy notifications like front door secured. And good evening, armed home mode set. It's comforting when you live alone. Until it isn't. On a Thursday, the lock announced front door unlocked. I was in the shower. I froze, soap burning my eyes, then heard the deadbolt thunk and the chain drag against the door. I got out dripping and opened the app with shaky fingers. No unlock event. Last logged action, armed home by me 10:41 p.m. I scrolled. The log refreshed, then stuttered and added a new line in gray, unlock by admin inside, 11:06 p.m. I never created an admin. I'm me. There's a separate emergency. That's it. I grabbed a towel and a hammer and crept to the hallway. The camera over the entry rotated with that insecty whir it makes when it auto-frames. The door was closed, chain on, bolt thrown. Nothing obvious was wrong. I told myself the voice alert had lagged and the log was bugged. Because everything techie is bugged, right? I relocked everything and pinged support. A bot called Bree told me to uninstall, reinstall. We value your security, the blue bubble said. I muted it and went to bed with the hallway light on and my phone face down beside me. At 2:24 a.m., the lights pulsed, all of them. The app said they were off, yet my bedroom flashed like someone slowly unscrewing a bulb and screwing it back in. The thermostat slid to 80 by itself. The speaker in the kitchen announced in my mom's voice, soft Midwestern vowels I haven't heard in 6 years, "Sweetie, the door." I didn't move. The chain scraped. The bolt creaked. I watched my own camera feed on my phone while the camera itself turned to look at the door. The log updated. Front door, opened, by, admin inside. My heart kicked like it was trying to leave without me. The hallway was a warehouse of shadows. The door remained closed. On the video, though, it stood ajar, just enough to show the line of dark between frame and slab, and a shape leaned into that gap. Not a head, more like the suggestion of one. My camera compression turned the motion into blocks. The audio picked up breathing in a rhythm that didn't match mine. I whispered, "Hello?" because apparently I'm an idiot in a horror movie. The kitchen speaker answered with my mother's laugh, and a phrase she used to say when I was going to bed, teeth, lights, doors. It sounded right and wrong. The cadence was off, the way a recording feels when you've cut and pasted syllables to make a ransom note. I opened a second app, the one with the lock manufacturer. New log, remote access, enabled by admin inside. I never enabled remote access. I pulled the breaker for the entry hall like a lunatic. The house went dark, except for the emergency path lights that I forgot I had. In that dead, battery-lit gloom, the bolt on the front door slid back, slow as a breath. I put the hammer down and grabbed the heaviest thing in reach, the laundry detergent bottle. My brain, choosing soap as a weapon. The door didn't open. The thermostat went to 85. The speakers whispered. My mother's voice blurred with a second voice underneath it, like 2 tracks summed wrong. "Open, sweetheart. I made your favorite." I changed tactics and went for analog. I shoved a chair under the knob, wedged a board from the hall closet against the jamb. Then I went to the panel and killed the main. Silence dropped like a curtain. The lights died, the speakers died, the hum of the fridge died. I stood in absolute black, heart like a drum waiting. In the dark, the lock clicked, a manual physical click. I don't remember moving. I remember stubbing my toe, swearing, the detergent bottle thudding somewhere, and the thready bright of my phone as I woke it. No Wi-Fi, no cell. The app loaded to a cached screen with one fresh line. Good night routine, executed by admin inside. The routine turns off the lights, locks the door, arms the system, and plays my mom saying teeth, lights, doors, because I recorded it from a voicemail years ago as a joke when I first set all this up. I stared at the sentence. The door stayed shut, the chain hung quiet. I got through the night by sitting on the floor with my back against the door and the hammer. In my lap, counting between creaks until dawn made the living room a shade lighter than not. The power company came by to check a reported outage, which I hadn't reported. The tech said there wasn't one. He asked if I'd smelled burned plastic. I shook my head and didn't mention the speaker. Support escalated my ticket to a human who told me with gentle cheer that the admin user sometimes appears when a device creates a default profile for local control. It's normal, he said. Nothing to worry about. He walked me through a factory reset, and my devices went back to chirping. That night, at 11:06 p.m., my phone lit my bedroom with a small blue rectangle. It said, "Welcome home, Mom," in my own automation name. The front camera showed my empty stoop. The log said, "Unlock by admin inside." I lay very still and listened to the sound of someone walking. Down my hallway, past every sensor I own, none of which tripped, headed straight for my bedroom door. Throwaway, for obvious reasons. Snowed in alone at my ranch house when something started knocking on every window in a pattern, then on the chimney. The blizzard came in sideways, wet snow that smothered even the hum of the highway a mile away. I'd stocked up, stacked wood, plugged my phone into a battery bank, and texted my sister that I'd be offline until the weather passed. The ranch house is old but tight. When the power died at 9:47, it died clean. The quiet afterward felt like a pressure change. At 10:15, something tapped the kitchen window. One knock, then silence long enough for me to settle again. Then two, then three. I told myself ice was shedding from the eaves. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stoked the stove. 10 minutes later, the living room window on the opposite side of the house got the same treatment. 1, 2, 3. The sound was crisp, like knuckles against glass, not like branches. I whistled for the dog. He came but wouldn't go down the back hall. He planted his feet and stared at the dark rectangle where the hall swallowed the light, ears pinned, wet nose working. I snapped my fingers. He didn't blink. The mudroom window knocked. 1, 2, 3. I stood in the doorway to the hall and listened as the sounds circled the house, each window in sequence. Kitchen, living room, mudroom, bedroom, moving clockwise like someone walking the siding with their palm out. The dog whined and crawled under the table. My mind flipped desperately through rational explanations. A loose shutter, a branch, a person pranking me in a whiteout. I opened the back door to check the yard and immediately wished I hadn't. The wind tore at the hinge like it had been waiting, and snow blew in like smoke. I kicked the door shut and braced my weight against it until the latch seated. In that second, the world outside was illuminated by my porch light. I saw the porch buried in drifts and a single set of prints. They started at the top step, not up the steps from the yard, but at the top step, as if whoever made them had placed their feet there from above. From where? The roof? I locked the door and put a chair under it because I'm not proud. The tapping stopped. I held my breath. The quiet was somehow worse. The dog let out a gasping bark that sounded like he'd been kicked. He stared at the ceiling. The ceiling creaked. Snow thumped off the roof. The house sighed the way old houses do, then something heavier then. Snow shifted directly above me and scraped along the shingles, slow. The sound of weight moving on its hands and knees. I ran to the bedroom for the rifle because theater rules say you only won't need it if you have it. The rifle was fine. My hands were not. I couldn't work the bolt at first. I forced air into my lungs, told myself about raccoons, about deer, about physics. The scraping reached the chimney and paused. The stove flared as a downdraft puffed ash back into the room. A gray belch that set the dog barking for real, teeth bared at the flue. From inside the chimney came a knock. 1, 2, 3. I don't think I've ever been as still as I was in that moment, maybe not even since. The stove door glowed a dull orange. The ash smell carried something else with it, metallic, like pennies on your tongue. The knock repeated, a fraction lower this time, like the sound moved down a foot, testing the brick. I backed into the hall, rifle up. The phone on the counter showed no service, no weather alerts, just my last text to my sister snowed in. Back Sunday. The living room window fogged with my breath. Then, as if it had read my pulse and grown bored, the sound left the chimney and crawled across the roof to the front eave. Snow slid in a sheet and smacked the porch. Silence. A minute. 5. I started to hope it had gone when someone stepped from the roof onto the porch. Roof. Then onto the top step. Then onto the deck boards outside the front door. The doormat shifted. The dog crawled farther under the table, until only his shaking back end stuck out. There was a slow scrape against the door, at handle height, like a palm feeling for the knob. The deadbolt thunked in its housing, not moving, just tested. Then, just above the handle, 3 soft knocks. 1, 2, 3. I didn't say who is it, because I am not entirely stupid. I kept the rifle trained and the safety off, and the distance measured in breaths until the scraping stopped. When it did, there came a softer sound, almost tender, of something dragging across the wood of the door, as if it had laid its ear there to listen to me listening. It left the same way it had come. Steps receded across the porch. Something heavy slid up the siding like a man climbing a fire escape, then a thump as weight settled onto the roof. It moved away toward the far peak. Minutes later, on the other side of the house, the bedroom window received 3 knocks. 1, 2, 3. The storm ended in the morning like someone flipped a switch. The power came back. I put the rifle down only when I could hear the fridge hum again, because it felt like normal was a sound you could rebuild from. I went outside around noon. The sun turned the drifts into diamond knives. The prints on the porch were still there, clean as stamps, bare, human, toes splayed against the cold, no arch, no heel detail, just the suggestion of weight that didn't mind the temperature. They began at the top step and ended at the door. There were no prints away. Above, on the carport roof, snow had been scuffed in 2 parallel tracks like knees. Long-time lurker, first post. A paper bag labeled with my name showed up at my door with my own spare keys inside, and my partner's voice asked to come in. A little after 9, my doorbell pinged with the cheery "someone's at your door," even though I hadn't ordered anything. The camera feed popped up. On the mat sat a plain paper bag folded twice, Sharpie across the front, my name underlined twice. In smaller writing on a sticky note, "It's me, let me in." I texted my partner because she's the only one who drops things without warning. She sent a photo of a Midwestern hotel lamp and a shoe and wrote, "2 more nights to go. Miss you, 3 states away. Someone's messing with me," I typed. I almost added, "You wrote me a love note," but didn't, because the handwriting on the sticky looked like hers. Not just girly scribble similar, hers. The same weird way she crosses her T, the way her Y curls back on itself like a fishhook. I watched the bag for a full minute. Nobody on the porch, no car lights in the street. The neighbor's oak tossed shadows across my steps. I texted my friend 2 doors down. He didn't reply. I turned on the porch light remotely. The bag didn't care. I cracked the door on the chain and leaned into the gap. Winter air nosed in. The bag was heavier than it looked, like it had something dense at the bottom. I dragged it inside with my foot and shut the door fast enough to bang the frame. I opened the bag at the kitchen counter. Inside, my spare key ring, the one I keep hidden outside in a magnetic box, and my own garage clicker. The key ring had a fleck of concrete stuck to the magnet. The clicker smelled faintly of bleach. My stomach dropped like an elevator. The doorbell pinged again. This time there was audio, a knock and a voice just to the left of my camera's pickup. "Hey babe," it said, perfectly my partner's voice. "I forgot my keys. Can you open up?" There are moments when fear arrives late, like a bad punchline. This was one. The note, the bag, the smell, the voice using a pet name she only uses when she's in a good mood. My hands went cold enough I almost dropped my phone. I hit the mic on the doorbell app. "You can leave it. I'll grab it." The voice came back, half a laugh, half a sigh. "Very funny," it said, and then used a phrase we use when we joke about being locked out, teeth, lights, doors, the way my mom used to say, copied into our life. Except my partner always flips lights and teeth, says lights, teeth, doors. It's one of those dumb couple things we've teased each other about for years. She never gets it in that order. The voice waited. My porch light flickered. A second knock, knuckles twice on wood, impatient but still playful. "Come on, it's cold." I didn't answer. I texted my partner again. "What color's your toothbrush?" It's a dumb authentication, but we've used it before when a weird number texts. She replied with a picture of the hotel sink and a very blue toothbrush end. On my porch, the voice moved closer to the door. The camera caught a sliver of a shoulder as something leaned just out of frame. A whisper, "You changed the hide key." Good. That one was easy to find. The magnet box is not visible unless you lie down on the porch and reach under a particular board. I called 911. Voice low, a little shame draped over it, because saying my partner's voice is outside but she's in Ohio sounds like too much Reddit. The dispatcher kept me talking while a car crept the neighborhood. I set the phone down on speaker, grabbed a kitchen knife and stood at the end of the hall where I could see the door and the back of the house in my peripheral. The voice outside stopped pretending to be warm. The handle jiggled. The chain ticked against the wood. A new sound, quiet, metallic, came from the garage. The clicker. I hadn't noticed the bag held both until I dumped it and the clickers skittered across the counter. It lay where it fell, gray little tombstone. And yet the garage door motor groaned. A dull thump. The door tried to roll up, hit the manual lock I'd thrown, and bucked. From outside, the same voice moved to the garage side. "This one too?" It said, "Sing-song." The motor whined again and again, slamming into the lock. The dispatcher asked me to stay away from the door. I had both hands on the knife and nowhere to put them that felt useful. Headlights bloomed in my front window. The porch steps creaked like someone unweighted them. The garage went quiet mid-whine. A minute later, a cop radio crackled outside and a flashlight beam sliced the yard. There was nobody on my camera, nobody on the porch, no footprints on the walk because the ground was too dry. The bag was on my counter where I'd put it. The spare keys magnet box wore a fresh gouge like someone had pried it out of concrete and then scraped off residue. The clicker smelled like a public pool. The sticky note read, "It's me, let me in." It sat next to the sink. The officer looked at the note and said, "That your girlfriend's handwriting?" I nodded. He asked if she could have mailed something. I shook my head and showed him the timestamp on her text and the hotel lamp photo. He suggested I change my locks and call him if the person came back. He didn't say person. He said party, like a form. I changed the locks the next day. I threw the magnet box in the trash and scrubbed the clicker until the smell eased. That night, as I set the alarm, the speaker in the kitchen, unprompted, repeated a phrase it has never said on its own. Lights, teeth, doors, said perfectly in my partner's voice. And then, in my own voice, recorded on some other day, "Let me in." I don't know what good posting this will do, but I can't handle this alone anymore. My hallway motion lights started triggering toward my bedroom like someone was walking, then the timestamps played backward. The hallway in my house is long enough that the electrician suggested motion lights. "You'll thank me," he said. "They'll chase you to the bedroom." It's true, at night, the little domes in the baseboards blink on as you walk, one by one ahead of you, like an obedient dog. At 1:41 a.m., 3 weeks after I installed them, I woke to a line of light along the bottom of my door. The motion lights were coming on from the far end of the hall, one after another, toward me. I stared at the crack and saw the glow swell, pause, swell again, like someone walking my way. I told myself it was the cat. Then I remembered I don't have a cat. The lights stopped at my door. The baby gate I use as a barrier when my niece visits, standing 2 rooms back because I never took it down, clicked and swung open. I sat up. The handle on my door moved a millimeter. I'd locked it for no reason I could defend. Now the reason was my heartbeat. I whispered into the room, "Who's there?" Because nothing inside me wants me to survive a movie. The lights went out all at once. The line under my door died. I got up, put my ear to the wood and heard nothing. No breathing, no floor creaking, just the far refrigerator cycling and the tiny ticks a house makes when it resettles. I watched the camera feed from the hallway on my phone. The last saved clip showed the lights tripping toward my door. I rewound in a scrub bar. In reverse, it looked like the lights were moving away from me. I hit play forward again. The lights triggered in sequence, but the timestamps were weird. Each light's activation time was a second earlier than the one before it. The closer to my door, the earlier the time. As if it had already happened there first. I thought, firmware glitch. I thought, sleep. Then something slid under the door. Not all the way, just the pads of fingers, palm up, as if asking. The skin was pale and the cracks light. The nails were clean. There were only 3 fingers and a thumb visible, like a hand missing its ring finger, or like the angle hit it. I stumbled backward hard enough to hit the dresser. The hand withdrew so gently that the hairs on my arms all rose at once. After a long minute, the motion lights, and I swear this is true, fired again from my door outward, away, toward the far end of the hall, one by one as if something had turned and walked back the way it came. When the last light blinked off at the far end, my phone chimed with a motion notification. The thumbnail was nothing, just empty hall, but the timestamp was 1:38 a.m. 3 minutes earlier. I scrubbed to that moment. The lights were already on near my door. A shadow crossed the first light out by the living room. Long, thin, taller than. The lights are set to register, like a sliver of a person just out of frame. Each sensor popped as if tripped by air pressure. When the shadow reached my door, the clip ended, overwriting itself with a new file labeled 141. I texted my brother because he knows wiring. He wrote back LOL ghosts and then, "Check the orientation of your sensors?" I checked. The manufacturer app showed all sensors with normal status. No tamper alerts, no errors. I reset them anyway, sitting on the floor with my back to the bed frame, because it felt like the only solid thing left. At 2:06, the lights came on again in their domino run toward me. I didn't move. I watched the crack in the app and the analog lock on my door. The handle jiggled once in a testing way. The baby gate out there clicked closed all on its own, like someone had lifted it and set it in its latch as they passed. My phone pinged twice, 2 motion clips. I tapped the first, the lights coming toward me at 2:06. I tapped the second, the same lights going away at 2:05. The clock on my phone read 2:07. Something knocked softly on the door, not ask to come in soft, more like you'd knock to test a wall. The sound traveled from knob height down to the baseboard, like fingers walking. Then the same hand as before slid under the door and held there, palm up, waiting. The skin, now that I was closer, was wrong, too smooth, like the texture you get when you drag a blur filter over an image and lose pores. The nails shone as if buffed. I reached with the tip of the broom I'd brought to nudge it away. The hand turned, impossibly flat, and caught the broom straw between thumb and forefinger. It tugged, gentle, like play. I whispered, "Please stop." I didn't know if I was talking to the hand or myself, or the part of my brain that wanted to know what would happen if I opened the door. The hall lights all died at once. In that dark, the hand withdrew. The under-door gap filled with a weight on the other side, a presence you feel in your teeth. I smelled something faint and bland, like new plastic. The app chimed one more time. New log, always sensor, clear. Then bedroom sensor occupied. Then, a beat later, while I was still there, clutching a broom, listening to my own breathing, bedroom sensor, vacant. I didn't open the door until sunrise. When I did, the baby gate was latched. The hall smelled like nothing. On the floor outside my door, lay my hall camera, face down, wires neat in a coil, as if someone had unscrewed it and set it aside so it wouldn't see the next part. I moved that week. The motion lights stayed with the house. Sometimes I wake at 1:41 in the new place and stare at the bottom of the door, waiting for light to move the wrong direction. Sometimes I see it anyway, in my head, the sequence already happening where I haven't been yet, the hand already under the door,